You know, from the phone in your pocket to the coffee in your mug, pretty much everything you own has been on an incredible journey to get to you. That journey, that's global logistics, and it's the invisible engine that literally powers our modern world. So let's peel back the curtain and see how it all really works. I mean, have you felt it? The delays, the shortages, the crazy prices? You're definitely not alone. It feels like the entire global shipping system has been stuck in one giant traffic jam. So what is actually going on behind the scenes? Well, the pandemic basically threw a huge wrench into the gears. All of a sudden, we had microprocessor shortages that brought car factories to a standstill. We had a massive shortage of shipping containers, leaving products just sitting at the docks. And on top of that, shipping costs went through the roof. It created this huge, complicated maze. Now, it might look like total chaos, but here's the good news. There's actually a structured process, a map, if you will, that businesses use to find their way through this global maze. It's all about having a solid plan and knowing the rules of the road, or, the rules of the sea. So here's the map we're going to follow in this explainer. We'll start with a simple 4-step framework for managing it all. Then we're going to decode the essential rules of trade, clear up some confusing shipping terms, see how a shipment actually happens, and finally, take a peek at what the future might hold. All right, let's dive into the framework itself. This is really the secret sauce, the core strategy that turns what could be a chaotic mess into a smooth, well-oiled process. And you know what? It really boils down to just 4 essential steps. First up, you map out the entire journey to get a handle on the total cost, not just the obvious stuff. Second, you pick your transportation mode. Is it going by sea, air, or some combination? Third, you double-check and validate that all your systems and partners are good to go. And finally, step 4, you execute the plan and get your stuff moving. Okay, now we need to dig into step 1, because honestly, this is the most critical part. Before a single thing gets loaded onto a truck or a ship, everybody has to agree on the rules. This is where we learn to speak the language of global trade. And the key to that language is a little something called Incoterms. Think of Incoterms as a universal rulebook for international trade. They were created by the International Chamber of Commerce to make absolutely sure that a seller in, say, Vietnam and a buyer in Brazil are on the exact same page. No confusion. And these terms cover the whole shebang. They spell out exactly who is responsible for what. They pinpoint the precise moment that risk, like what if the container falls off the ship, transfers from the seller to the buyer. And they make it crystal clear who pays for what, from packaging to the final delivery. This chart is a perfect example of how it works. Let's take a really common Incoterm, FOB, which stands for free on board. As you can see, the seller is on the hook for everything: packaging, trucking to the port, even loading it onto the ship. But the second those goods are safely on board that vessel, bam, responsibility and all the costs flip over to the buyer for the big ocean journey and everything after. So Incoterms are fantastic for sorting out logistics and risk, but they have one huge blind spot. They don't do a thing to make sure the seller actually gets paid or that the buyer actually gets their goods. And that's where something called a letter of credit saves the day. It's basically an escrow service run by banks. A bank guarantees payment to the seller as soon as they can prove they've shipped the goods correctly. It's brilliant because it protects the seller from not getting paid, and it protects the buyer from paying for goods that never arrive. Okay, so the rules are set, payment is secured. Now we can move on to step 2. Choosing the actual route. You got to figure out how your stuff is going to get from point A to point B, especially when it's taking a journey by truck, then ship, then maybe even train. And this brings us to a really important distinction that trips a lot of people up: multimodal versus intermodal. They both use multiple kinds of transport, right? But the difference is all about the contracts. With multimodal, it's simple. You have one contract with one company, and they handle everything. With intermodal, you're the one juggling multiple contracts, one for the trucker, one for the shipping line, and so on. So you've mapped your costs, you've set your terms, and you've picked your route. We're in the home stretch now, which brings us to our final 2 steps: validation and execution. This is where the plan smacks into reality. Step 3 is all about validation. Think of it as the final pre-flight check. Is your tech talking to your supplier's tech? Is the customs broker ready? Is the bank ready with the payment? Once all the lights are green, it's go time. That's step 4, execution. You sign the contracts and you manage the shipment as it moves through the real world. dealing with everything from bad weather to surprise port delays. All right, we've been deep in the weeds with details. Let's zoom all the way back out. Because to really get a handle on the future of trade, you first have to appreciate the absolutely massive scale of the system we're talking about. I want you to take a guess. What percentage of all world trade travels across the ocean on a ship? The answer is, well, it's kind of mind-blowing. It's this number. Yep, a full 90%. As this chart shows, for all our talk about planes and trucks and trains, the vast, overwhelming backbone of the global economy is ocean shipping. And why? It's simple. Nothing else can even come close to its low cost and its insane capacity. And that brings us right back to where we started. The chaos of the last few years really pulled back the curtain and showed us just how delicate this massive, complex system is. It was a wake-up call, showing us just how vulnerable we are and how much we rely on partners all over the world to keep things moving. So what's the big lesson here? We've seen the system bend, and in some places we saw it break. As it slowly recovers and starts to adapt, we're all left with a huge question. What is the new landscape of global trade going to look like? And more importantly, will we be ready for the next big test?